We're good. We're live.
All right. Welcome to Wednesdays with Willa, everyone. I'm glad that we could be together for another wonderful show. Those of you who follow me on my Facebook page, Willa White Medium, know that this is a show I've been doing for 3 years. This is year 4 for us now. And it's always wonderful to share different topics relating to spiritualism, mediumship, faith, family, and more. And I typically have a special guest on the show, and we talk about one of those topics. And I am delighted to have on my show today, Celeste Elliott. Thanks for being on the show today, Celeste.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure to be here.
And for those of you who don't know who Celeste Elliott is, she's a registered medium here in Lilydale. So we're like colleagues, I guess you could call us, and friends and neighbors. And, we're both registered mediums here in Lilydale, which is a very special spiritualist center for the world, and has lots of wonderful educational opportunities regarding mediumship and healing and spiritual development. So I encourage everybody to take a look at the Lilydale Assembly website and know that there are things that are still going on in terms of education and classes, especially via Zoom online, so you can take advantage of those things. And on Wednesday nights, we have the healing temple services that are still going on, again, via Facebook. So you can take a look at those wonderful opportunities. Another great tidbit to know about Celeste Elliott is that she also has a show where we are showmates on Blog Talk Radio, Lilydale Blog Talk Radio, and there are other shows as well. Now, Celeste's show airs on Thursday mornings and is Wake Up to Spirit.
Yes.
And we all have our own kind of unique understanding and perspective that we bring to it. So it's great that Celeste is able to do her show and I'm able to do my show. So I'm Wednesday mornings, she's Thursday mornings, same time, 10 a.m. So you can check things out on your Facebook page, right? So is it Celeste Elliott? How do they find you?
It's Celeste Elliott, and I've got my little picture in black and white.
Yeah, just look for the curly ginger.
Yeah, exactly right.
And you got her. So, another cool thing is that Celeste is part of a mother-daughter duo, just as I am. My mother is a medium, and Celeste's mother is a medium. And so we've done a show in the past on Wednesdays with Willa where we talked about being young mediums. So I encourage everybody to look back on my Facebook page, Willa White Medium, and you can see the archive video of that show. If you just type in Willa White and Celeste Elliott, you'll find us talking about being young mediums. We get a lot of questions about that, don't we?
Yes, we do. And you know what's funny too is both of us got registered before our moms.
That's true. That's true.
Which people do not expect. They expect that our moms have been here, longer than us, and we joined the family business, as it were. And as it turned out, both of us kind of, we had that same journey where we studied and around the same time,
Well, I think that's an excellent point to remind people about. That's although I do credit my parents with being wonderful supporters of me, and their spiritual journey certainly has helped mine, and vice versa. But it is kind of cool that way. And some other things that we wanted to talk about today. Our topic today is women of spiritualism, and I have a feeling that this is going to be just kind of a part one, because there are so many women of spiritualism, and we're going to talk a little bit about why that is, and then we highlight a few of the particular people from spiritualism's history that have been kind of interesting and perhaps showstoppers, as it were. So I'm excited to have this conversation with you today, Celeste. It's going to be great.
Me too. Yeah, thank you. I'm very excited too. What's funny is because I've been I joined the Women's Day event committee about 3 years ago here in Lilydale. And I've been chairing it for the last 2 years, and we are going to move forward next year as well. But it's sort of, I joined it just because I thought, well, this would be fun. And I kind of like, I had a vague notion, you know what I mean? And then it gave me opportunity to really kind of lean into the subject matter and see things from a different perspective. And I want to make sure that people understand that because we're talking about women in spiritualism does not mean that men are not welcome, are not a part of spiritualism, are disenfranchised by spiritualism.
In fact, we should probably do a show called Men of Spiritualism too, so that they, you know.
Absolutely. Yeah, we've got some good ones there too, you know. We just happen to be in kind of a unique position with spiritualism where, you know, I come from a place and a background where I grew up between spiritualism and metaphysics and the Catholic Church. Most people come to something from a different background, one way or another. You know, I kind of got more of a head start than others. But I remember being in Catholic school in like 2nd or 3rd grade, and I think 2nd grade is when we went through communion. But they had one of the teachers, we were getting ready for First Communion, and going through the lessons for that, and she said a prayer that we would all be inspired to grow up to be priests or nuns. And I thought to myself, oh, good, then I'll pick priest because they're treated better. I had no idea that, you know, like, and it's like, I knew that there were no female priests, but it didn't click. You know what I mean? That I couldn't, I don't know. So, as a child of the 80s, I thought anything was possible. So
I know, we were told this, weren't we?
And I just, you know, like it, anytime I start laughing, I start tearing up too. So I just, you know, because it is funny. But I thought about that, and I thought about, you know, it also, I'm also an ordained minister in the Spiritualist church tradition, I should say, because there's more than one church, certainly. In fact, I belong to 2, so, you know. But there's my brother ran into somebody from that we had known growing up, that we also went to a private Christian school for a while, and he was telling them that, you know, they asked about me, and he said, oh, well, she's a minister now and she's living in New York and blah, blah, blah. And that's the church out of which I learned to understand making personal connection with creator energy. That was the church where I learned about spiritual healing in a lot of ways, and prophecy in a lot of ways. Not because prophecy and mediumship glove in hand, but sometimes different thing.
Very different, but I mean, it's in the Bible so extensively, really. You know, visions and mediumship, and those are all parts of it. Absolutely.
Yeah. And what was funny was, so my brother was updating this person we knew, and they were absolutely horrified by the idea of my being a minister, because in their tradition, only men can be in the ministry. And if women are part of the ministry, they have to get approval of what they're saying. It has to be that they're part of a ministry team, but their husband is the head.
So their particular religion, that's how they see that. Yeah. Special dispensation must be given. Must be.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know if you have to get it in writing. I don't but that's their tradition, and that's okay. But I would never have really fit into that mold, you know. And I think that anybody who is spiritually curious, a spiritual seeker, they want to find their, you know, their
Their
tribe,
niche, their
um,
tribe. Yeah.
their niche, what fits them. And sometimes they, you know, adapt their belief system, remodel their old belief system and add on, you know, or sometimes they, you know, kind of find something that they leave, they know what they don't want and they go towards what they want. But
Right.
spiritualism, giving, you know, when you and I were talking, we were talking about what makes spiritualism unique, and saying from the beginning women have had equal voice within the movement and the philosophy, and that is hugely unique. um, and I'm acutely aware of that because of situations like that.
Yeah.
So just kind of it's just funny, you know, spirit will lead you where you need to be. So
Absolutely, and that's a good point to make about spiritualism. That within this religious movement, women have been such given equal rights, as it were, and it was one of the ways that women could be at the podium and be speakers, you know, in front of large numbers of people, and have their voice be heard. And it's one of the reasons that the women's rights movement did have involvement in spiritualism and vice versa. And Susan B. Anthony visited Lily Dale, and there were a lot of people who were proponents of women's rights that were involved in spiritualism as well. And I know we're going to talk about some of that today, but it's a wonderful point to make, and that there does not seem to be that that stigma attached to women being able to speak, and to be a medium is such a wonderful thing, to know that we are vessels of knowledge for ourselves and for others, and that we can allow that to channel through us from the divine, that we have the ability, that whether you're male or female, you can connect with the God source in beautiful, beautiful ways. So who's the first person that you wanted to talk about today in terms of women of spiritualism?
I think we should go all the way back to the Fox sisters.
Okay.
I think we'd be really remiss if we didn't. They
Right.
are came out of some very, very hard circumstances, and I think that's not really acknowledged, you know. Because I think, you know, women who were doing mediumship and at the very beginning, I think the reason we got away with it at the very beginning is because we were bringing through other people's voices, and not, it wasn't really our own. And
Right.
then because I believe, and I don't know what your thoughts on this are, but I think that certain forms of mediumship have phases of popularity with the spirit world, kind of like, you know, music has phases of popularity, and it's all music, but you know, you're probably not going to go to the club and listen to some Baroque classics, you know. You're probably going to want
Right.
something moving
So
through.
we'll give them some background about the Fox sisters. The Fox sisters were, you know, young children at the time, that they were having spirit connection and communication in their home in Hydesville, New York. And we had Kate, we had Margaret, and there was an older sister, Leah, that became part of things eventually. But Kate and Margaret were the ones that communicated with spirit and were able to bring to light something that had gone on. Now, there were raps in the house. This started with raps that people heard, and that people had heard raps in the house prior to the Fox family living there.
Yes.
But so I'm sure the ghosty stories had already kind of been around about
Right.
that particular house, and
Yeah.
hauntings and ghosts were a big thing in Victorian times, and to some extent, people make a lot of it in today's time. But those sisters, because of what they heard in the community, it started to become investigated by community members, and it got splashed all over the newspapers in the United States, and it started to go around the world, the story of the Fox sisters. Eventually, they started doing things in big halls, doing what's known as physical mediumship.
Right.
The idea that physical mediumship things will happen, that there'll be rappings heard and communications, kind of like the idea of the Ouija board, but more to do with, let's have a sequence of what this means, yes, no, and that they were able to identify people even alphabetically because of this. Correct?
Part Ouija board and part Morse code.
There were other mediums at the time that were also having these kind of things, like the Davenport brothers in Buffalo, New York. There were other things that were going on during this time, but it was a big splash that these young girls had this go on. Now, we should just mention, for the sake of all of this, that there was a whole, whether they were real or not, there was a whole fake thing, not fake thing having to do with this. But what was birthed out of this is that there was real mediumship among other people, and it started getting talked about because of what the Fox sisters, this event that occurred. So that's why they have a place in spiritualist history.
Exactly. And to have an understanding that the Fox sisters, that was the house they were in, the cottage in Hydesville, was supposed to be a temporary, pardon me, a temporary situation, because they were renting, and it was a very, were not a family of means. The father, unfortunately, was an alcoholic. He had a lot of problems. The girls later on, possibly because of all of the trauma that they suffered because of being child stars.
Right.
That in itself, to take two young girls and ship them all around the country, performing in big arenas, and not really having their older sister that you mentioned briefly, Leah, was sort of their agent. And she was, you have to remember, this was a time when women did not own themselves. They were not considered full citizens. You didn't have the right to vote. You didn't have the right to earn money. And you didn't have the right to carry it on yourself. Pockets were not legal, which is kind of ridiculous.
They did have pockets, and they had ridicules, they had those kind of things that they were allowed to have, but not big amounts of money.
Right, exactly, yeah.
But they had pockets in their dresses for carrying things, for sure.
For a while, they were actually outlawed, which is
in certain places, yes.
In certain places, which is kind of crazy, but
it is kind of crazy. You make such a good point that they were child stars, and that they were trotted out in that sense of, hey, look what these performers can do for you now. But there is that other element of the understanding that it started to, because of the phenomenon of this, that people started to say, I wonder if there's an aspect of this that is real. Just like with any kind of thing that's out there, when in any career, you're going to have people who can do things fraudulently, and you can have things who are authentic. And so that did start to spur the movement forward in many ways, and gain in popularity, and people started to sit in their homes and see whether a phenomenon would happen for them. Now, I'm sure a large part of it was, ooh, but some of it was real and was authenticated because of various physical tests that they put mediums through.
Very much so. and not just the Fox sisters, but
Yeah, yeah.
you know, they
Not
were,
just that.
you know, they would they they were accused of cracking their toes to make
Yeah,
the knocking noise. So there were times when they were actually requested to perform nude. So to prove that they weren't cracking a joint. But if anybody has ever heard spirit rapping, it doesn't just come from one place. It
no,
it can be a corner over here and back wall over here, and it's all, you know, it's moving around, it's active, it's, you know, so and what's funny is from in the Hydesville cottage, because we did have the actual cottage here in Lilydale. It has since burned down, unfortunately. Um, there was a support beam in the ceiling. And that's where that's where they started communicating and actually making up the, you know, they were
the
playing.
code. Yeah,
You know, the Victorian era, women were, you know, especially female children, were considered sort of the epitome um, of innocence, I suppose is the best way to put that, you know. And
yeah,
so, that's probably what drew a lot of people in, is to kind of to see that. But then we moved beyond that. That sort of phased out.
yeah,
And trance was already picking up speed,
yeah,
because of mesmerism, that was taking hold in the culture at that time. And mesmerism, of course, is now known as hypnosis today.
yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, that's how people would kind of, they learned how to get into that altered state of consciousness, and let spirit come through. Um,
And
you know,
then and psychology really went with that and rolled with that to some extent, that idea of understanding the other different psyche, the consciousness that could happen with that. So there's a lot during that whole time that
Mhm.
definitely supported going deeper within the soul and deeper within the mind
Yeah,
during all of that. And
that,
so
that was,
we saw the rise of theosophism, you know, Madame Blavatsky, all of those kind of things, Rudolf Steiner. There was a lot going on during that whole time. Absolutely.
yeah, yeah. And that's, you know, if all of the cultural norms, if all of the setups had not happened at that time, you know, you had, it's really fascinating that there were so many different philosophies that were being birthed at that time in the consciousness. Um, but it was very much a time of um, people kind of coming into still a focus of the greater good. And you know, you didn't have radio, you didn't have television, so to go and see someone doing doing seance work, doing mediumship work, you know, and really reflecting on and wanting to ask, just like, I don't know about you, but how many times have you had a client come and say, you know, I wish so and so was still with us because I really wanted to ask them about X, but you know, but they're not here anymore. I wish that I had thought to ask them about Y when they were still here. I would have liked to have known that. And that gives that opportunity for communion of the souls, you know.
Conversation. And I think that's an important thing to make. There is, you know, some of the people we're going to talk about today have more of that idea of the fantastical that some people may put into the idea of the illusionist or magician category. But then there's this other understanding of the sacred and
Yeah.
connection, the sacred connection that can happen in true blue mediumship, the authenticity of those moments of really coming together and having a conversation with a loved one, almost like they were here in the flesh, but because they don't have the physical body, they're still able to do that. And usually through the help of a medium, that can be made possible. So I think it's really wonderful that things, that proof of continuity of life, all of that sort of thing really came into being. And here we are in the year 2020, and this is something that has gained popularity, and we have so many celebrity mediums, many of which are women, I've noticed.
Yes,
the TV celebrity mediums that are out there. And a lot of people think that that's because of the sensitivity of women and whatnot. But men can do this. Men can do this too. It's just that it does seem to draw more women. I know time's marching on. We better continue with a couple other women of spiritualism. Oh, this is great.
Well, and actually what you were talking about with bringing through the philosophy, and I think that's why the spirit world started to lose interest a little bit in sort of the physical phenomena, because I think people needed that at first, to get their attention.
Yeah.
Them in. So people could say, what's all this about? Is this real? They started to investigate. They started to sit in circle. The Victorian era was very much a time when people were focusing on philosophy regardless. So then you started to have, and it started to align very much with sort of some of the social movements like we were talking about too. There were some Christian sects that were already starting to ordain female ministers. So as the spiritualist movement and philosophy started to get cohesive and pull together in a more organized fashion, where so you had people like Reverend Dr. Anna Howard Shaw, who came to Lilydale, and she was an ordained Methodist minister, the first one in the U.S., which was huge, and then, but the philosophy of spiritualism, the tenets of spiritualism, because we talk about not having a dogma per se, but we have the seven original principles, and they were tranced by a medium by the name of Emma Hardin Britton. And she was really very fascinating in herself. She was a British medium, and she really helped to shape, she wanted, and actually she had always had kind of psychic tendencies, clairvoyant tendencies growing up. That was noted about her. But she wanted to kind of prove it to herself. And she, again, she was not a person that came from means. She was not a person who had exposure in society that, she would have had a lot of contacts and things. She kind of came up on her own, and had to earn the respect by, but again,
well, I know she played a big role in theosophy. She's one of the founders of the theosophy, the Theosophical Society with Madame Blavatsky, and that was a big thing until they had a parting of the ways. But I do feel that is something that we need to know, and that I believe she also did things with Rudolf Steiner. I believe that she had connections with him as well.
I was not aware of that. I know that when she came to the US from London, she would attend seances, and if she did not feel that they were real, that she was very interested in exposing that. which I think is I think that shows her integrity. And I think it shows that she was really interested in only what had depth. But she came from nothing, and she became in with the inner circles of Washington, and got very involved in the election of Abraham Lincoln. And the Lincolns were, very much a people of their time, where there were many, many seances that were held in Washington, some in the White House. So it's very interesting. And I think because at that time, spiritualism got very popular because a lot of people were losing relatives to disease and famine and war. We had the Civil War at that time. But mediums were used to help, and female mediums in particular, some of the ones that were the most popular in Washington, were female, and they helped shape, apparently through their trance work, what went on military strategy wise, which is very interesting.
Very interesting. And I think that it's wonderful that they were able to assist in that higher power way. Absolutely. And I think that it's a wonderful thing to mention that she did support Lincoln and really tried to help those things along. And she's the one who came up with the original principle.
Yeah. Which I think, if nothing else, that is a massive contribution. Because
huge.
if the entire point is listening to the spirit world and saying, so what are we what?
Yeah, they kind of brought things together for spiritualism to have a set of principles, to say, okay, this is what we can believe in as a group of people who want to bring worship to our life, and the divine concept, the understanding of how to bring that about. And I think that it is essential for people to have those as spiritualists. I mean, when we are asking people to be members of spiritualist churches, they have to have that understanding of what are the principles, how are you going to explore those in your life. And even though you and I have been spiritualists for a long, long, long time, we still explore those principles, and we still think on those and meditate on them, and truly bring them into contemplation in our own life. And so I'm glad that we're mentioning Emma Hardenbring, because she really brought that to the forefront for all of us as spiritualists, and really help us understand the God concept within, and that mediumship, mediumship, prophecy, that spiritual healing are all gifts of the spirit.
Yes.
What an essential tenet for us as spiritualists.
Yeah. And really also very strongly leaning on natural law and the understanding of natural law. And that's in many ways how, if somebody asked me to explain what spiritualism is, because it's not like a lot of people know what spiritualism is. If we're
assumptions, they do have assumptions, right?
Right.
If we go out and about over to other people's houses for dinner or just meet people, they have assumptions about what it is until they get to know us better.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, you seem so normal. Are you sure? It's like, yeah. So, it's sort of, it's the understanding that the miraculous happens every day. That, that we're not truly separate from Creator. That, and really studying the philosophy of natural law, it really can help us to create harmony within our lives. And inner harmony is a massive victory, because we're not going to be able to control what's going on outside and around, you know. That's just not realistic and hasn't been from the dawn of time. So,
That's right.
um,
And that's what is such a steadying facet to spiritualism. When you do study spiritual natural law, it does steady you. It's something that you can refer to and feel the sense of, all right, there is harmony and peace within me and outside of me. I just have to see it and envision it in that way. And that the divine is working in profound ways in my life to bring about greater good.
yeah,
And so that's where, for those of you who don't understand what spiritual natural law, what those are, law of attraction, that's a big popular one, law of personal responsibility, law of creative reality, all of, there's a whole bunch of them that once you understand it, it really does help you in your life. The law of abundance,
yeah,
things
yeah,
like that all come into being. So, that's what Celeste and I are talking about at this particular
yeah,
time. And I encourage every single one of you to read up more about spiritual natural law
yeah,
and its principles of spiritualism. I think the big one that people don't understand when they think about what they think spiritualism is. We believe in God, and
yes,
that's a shocking thing for them. They're like, "You believe in God?" Yes, we do, and that's what makes all this possible. The sacred
exactly,
connection. We
yes, yeah,
believe in infinite intelligence.
yeah, and by many names, and yes, exactly. I don't know how communion with the soul would be possible if you don't believe in a creator, because where does the soul come from otherwise? But hey,
Exactly.
it's all
Exactly.
good. So, but I think one of the original tenets that was brought through by Emma Hardin Britton was the brotherhood of man. And we base, I think, a lot of that, especially the early spiritualists, we took a lot from that got us into the how women were treated very much, because we women were included in that kind of it says brotherhood, but really
Well, see, the whole mankind really does
yeah,
encompass women as well. It was,
do. We just,
it does encompass, and I think that's an important thing to know is that the men of spiritualism were very supportive of their women
yeah,
and of the understanding of equality and I so many of the women of spiritualism were brilliant, so it's really something that's part of that. So I guess because I have read so extensively in older books, I just don't take offense when they say mankind because
neither do
we're
I.
all under it.
It's one of those things that you think would be you know a, a a blanket understanding, but again, it's sort of like there are people who have no idea that what natural law is.
That's right.
Sometimes it bears a little further comment, but yeah, I think really living the value system out of that idea of the brotherhood of man, because it's very much uh, we were in this place historically in the 1800s, late 1800s, early 1900s, where women were, we had the industrial age coming into place and roles were shifting and women were working more out of the home. And it's like, if we're doing this work, but we don't own ourselves, we don't have a say in anything, we don't have a say in the conditions, and we're not allowed to, and if we speak publicly about anything, we are condemned. And the spiritualists were like, no, come on in.
That's right.
Let's talk about it. Let's talk about
They
social
believe
reform.
in a child's rights, especially because of children workers that were going on during the time, and so it was all a part of that umbrella of seeing things through in beautiful ways for all souls, young, old,
Yeah,
male, female, all of that.
yeah, absolutely. So the fact that, at that time, it was very scandalous for a woman to speak publicly and or perform publicly. You know, female singers, female musicians, female actors, actresses, activists, anything like that was considered on par with prostitution. If you know, and we don't think of that these days because we don't see anything wrong with any of that, because why would we? But that's how it was.
You know, I was just studying this with my children back in the time of the Emperor Justinian. He was married to Theodora, who
Yes.
later became Saint Theodora. Anyway, you know, she was an actress, and they had a law that you know, the emperor couldn't marry an actress, and he was like, got rid of that law, so he could marry his Theodora. And she very much advocated for women's rights, even way back when, during the time of Constantinople. So you know, it's just it's something that really started to come into play. Justinian's one of the reasons we have justice, that word justice, and many of the laws that we have. So even back then, it was a thing, and it started to move. Even back then, and I think by the time that of the birth of modern spiritualism, there it was just such a wonderful movement to allow for that, and people did start to have a hierarchy in their minds of the difference between someone who is you know, a pianist performer that way, and the other. So, you know, they started to make those distinctions more and more during that time. So it's a good point.
You know, and what's so funny is, so Netflix as a publicity stunt, you know, there's that new movie out called Enola Holmes.
Oh, okay. I thought you were going to say the other thing.
No.
Okay.
No, based on so Enola Holmes, which is of course a takeoff of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's famous spiritualist.
Yeah, he's a man of spiritualism. He definitely needs to be in there.
Yeah, and frequent visitor of Lilydale, FYI. So, but they started putting up, so Enola Holmes is the sister of Sherlock Holmes. So they put up a statue, and of course, two fictional characters, but they put up statues of real life sisters of these famous people around different places. So one is the sister of I believe it's Beethoven. No, Bach. It's Bach. Because he was a child prodigy, but so was she.
He was, but Bach, his whole family was, he was a whole family of musicians. Yeah.
But she
that's what they did. They would have family reunions and just play music.
Yeah. But she was considered to be more of a prodigy than he was. And she would go on tour, and she had huge performances, and now people are just rediscovering her. They weren't.
Well, the thing to keep, if it is Bach, the thing to keep in mind is even though he's well known in his own country, people did not know the full extent of what he was even able to do until well after his passing. So that is just quite true. You know, unfortunately, that's how it is for an artist. You know, you're not always, you know,
not always appreciated in your own time.
Yes,
yeah, absolutely.
So I mean, I'm not surprised that this is happening. You know, people are going back and figuring out the history. I've had Shannon Taggart on the show before, and we've talked about Hilda Klimt and her her understandings of being an artist and doing spiritualist art way back when, and that she may be actually the founder of modern art in some ways, the idea of the mother of it. So we can go back, we can their history is being reframed. Absolutely.
Very much. And actually Hilda Klimt is very, very interesting. I just posted an article about her not too long ago on my Facebook page because she did do spirit art, not in the way that she you sit for a reading and the art, like your mom does,
Right,
who
right.
she does amazing spirit art, and bringing through both, showing who's around you in spirit. But she
Yes.
did more abstract expressionism, and people knew that she was doing this work in trance.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they didn't necessarily know what to make of that.
I
But
think it's because one of her sisters, I believe, died, and then she started to really explore. That's a lot of times what ignites it for people, that they've had a family passing or friend passing, and it starts them on the journey of it. And she started to have more and more connection with that. And so there is a distinction. Some of her art was done with that idea of channeling of spirit, and some of it was just done without that.
yeah,
I guess that they have found records of the differences of art that comes through in that way.
that makes perfect sense to me. Even Bob Dylan talks about his experience in songwriting and how some of it he gets divine inspiration and he doesn't change it. Like Blowing in the Wind, he said that was a tranced or a channeled experience. And I should say channeled because he was conscious of what was coming through. So
Well, he's probably in a light trance and inspiration.
exactly, yeah. And then he said other things he tried to write on his own and it just never worked. So it is
That's
what
all
it
part
is.
of it.
Yeah, exactly. And that has been as it is from the dawn of time.
Mhm.
But it was such a special thing that the climate was the way it was as spiritualism was forming, that women were able to sort of capitalize on that and have a voice, and spiritualism came a lot out of it was a big proponent of, by and large, I should say, of the women's suffrage movement. But I will say more specifically the white women's suffrage movement, because
Well,
we
it had
should.
to start somewhere. Absolutely. I was reading not long ago that Marion Skidmore, I believe her eulogy was written by Susan B. Anthony. Marion Skidmore is a big reason why we have our beautiful library here today. She really believed in liberty and those things.
She
Absolutely.
was a real dynamo, and she brought a lot of women of note and a lot of women of means,
Yeah. Yeah.
to Yale, who were already sort of interested in the philosophy, and they were like, wait, there's a camp, I can go there for the summer.
Yes, yes.
And so yeah, the camp would not look like it does. We would not have our auditorium, we would not have our library if it weren't for women like this. And they served on the board here in Lilydale from not the first couple ones, but pretty much from the beginning, within the first 5 years. And that's a big deal.
Yes,
You know,
absolutely.
and they served, there were women's suffrage, or sorry, my apologies, women's equality clubs. Chautauqua County was a hotbed for that, as was spiritualism. So it all sort of came together in this way that, we started from the very beginning of Lilydale. Within the first few seasons, we always had, you have a 2-week camp season, and one of those days is a Women's Day, and you have these speakers coming in.
And there's a big parade, and people put, special bunting on their houses.
Yeah. Which,
Decorations.
I mean, that's amazing. And we have records from the Buffalo Express, which is the Buffalo News of its day, and the Cassadaga Farmer. And that was a paper, and the Sunflower, and different periodicals that talk about there being 7,000 people on the grounds when Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton were here, and they had just formed the what is now the National Organization of Women. But it was a suffrage political club at the time.
Yeah.
Organization, I should say, not club, but yeah. So, you know, because she wanted to speak at, Susan B. Anthony wanted to speak at Chautauqua. She had spoken at the courthouse steps in Mayville. And a year later, she wanted to come back. She wanted to speak at Chautauqua. She had been invited in by some of the ladies over there, which at the time, Chautauqua Institute still exists. It's in Mayville, New York. And
It started as a Baptist camp originally.
I was thinking it was Methodist, but you're probably right. But yeah, it was too conservative of a crowd. They didn't want her there. They were planning on protesting her, which she was used to, but then they said they wouldn't let her come. And so Lilydale was like, come on over. We're 2 train stops away.
That's right.
So, you know, huge deal. So she came here many, many times. And we were very lucky to have good records of that and photographic evidence.
That's right. Right. Yeah, that was a big deal to people at the time. They recognized what a big deal it was. Yes. And it's a big deal to us today.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So, yeah. I mean, that's a big part of the history that we're quite proud of. So
is there any other women of spiritualism you wanted to focus on today?
Good question.
Is there one last person you wanted to talk about before we close for today?
You know what? Many, but I think
I know that's why I said this is a part 1, because there are so many people that we do want to honor in that particular way. And I think, you know, it's something that we don't take that for granted now, and that's why we talk about these things. But we also know that they would have wanted us to get to a point like we are today, where we don't have to be thinking and worrying about those things. So I mean, I think we've gotten there a lot by and large. Mm-hmm. On the shoulders of the women and the men and the mediums that have gone before us, that have made a lot of this possible and really supported us from the beginning. It takes a special kind of courage, everyday courage, that comes into play in all of that. And there are plenty of other women of spiritualism to be focused on, but I think that's a really good start for everybody to kind of have, you know, the beginnings of it, especially if you're not used to talking about the spiritualist history and understanding how it's interwoven with so many other things that were going on at the time. You know, we're not just static beings. We do become very connected with the whole, and that's something that spirit definitely played a role in the formation of us as individuals and as groups, and that certainly spiritualism being part of that. I think it's good that we've been able to share some facets of history with folks today, and I appreciate that.
100%. Yeah. You know, I mean, it's such, coming into spiritualism and seeing how many women are in the church, and, you know, sometimes founders of churches, and you know, I mean, it's very much, you don't have to ever worry about, am I going to, you know, am I going to get called on, or am I going to be, you know, relegated to, I don't know, making the pamphlets, which is that's a big job in and of itself, but yeah, it's a nice thing.
Well, I think that's why we do need to honor our mediums, and yes, mediums are people too, but we do need to honor that there's that sacred connection that is occurring in those moments, male or female. This is a sacred connection that's happening for people, and that there's a genuine experience to be had through mediumship and through healing.
Yes.
And the history, we learn from it, but we can also be very inspired by it.
Exactly.
And when we can say, this firms up for us how we want to live our life, this firms up for me how I want to proceed with my own spiritual development, my own soul connection, and my mediumship and healing. So it's really beautiful. Thank you, Celeste. And for those of you who want to find Celeste, you can look up, I think, CelesteElliott.com, or is it Reverend Celeste?
Nope, just CelesteElliott.com, and that has all my information.
You need to connect with her, you absolutely can. And as I said, tune in tomorrow morning, Thursday morning at 10 a.m. Celeste has her show on Blog Talk Radio. It's part of the Lilydale radio family. And so you can enjoy connecting with Celeste again. And join me here next week on Wednesdays with Willa at 10 a.m. I'll have another great topic for you. And I don't want to forget to say that in two weeks, on October 28th, I'll have as my guest Suzanne Geisman. That she is a wonderful, well-respected evidential medium and spiritual teacher, and she has authored like 13 books, and she even wrote the very popular book, The Priest and the Medium, about Reverend Anne Gaiman. So I'm so grateful that she's coming on the show. We're going to talk about integrity, ethics, and about mediumship. So that's the focus of it. So please tune in and have a beautiful, lovely week, everyone. And thanks again, Celeste.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.